Now, because restructuring of the information that is provided is such a central aspect of problem solving, according to the Gestalt School of Psychology, this also implies that anything that hurts your ability to represent and then perhaps restructure the information does also hamper your ability to solve a problem. And I want to discuss a couple of these now, and then we will see a couple more a little further down in this lecture. Now, one way one way that can hurt problem solving is the presence of irrelevant information. Because sometimes irrelevant information can misguide people and lead them down paths that don't end up in solving the problem. And this tends to be much more severe in the case of ill-defined problems as opposed to well-defined problems. But there, sometimes it's easier in well-defined problems to spot information that is irrelevant. And typically, because everything is well-defined, that information doesn't quite hurt as much the solver. But take this example. You have loose black and blue socks in a drawer, and they're mixed in a ratio of 5 black socks to every 1 blue sock. Imagine the lights are off and you cannot turn them on. So you have to pick your socks in the dark. How many socks do you have to pull out of the drawer to make sure you will have a pair of the same color? Now, you might be tempted to start thinking about proportions and about probability, and every 6 socks, 5 will be black on average and 1 is blue. And so there's every 1 to 5, et cetera, et cetera. And you might be tempted to start this kind of calculation, which is unlikely to be particularly productive. Sorry, particularly helpful, I should say. Because it suffices to pull out 3 socks. Once you pull out 3 socks, 2 of them will be of one of the 2 colors, and the third one will be of a different color, which means you have a pair of the same color. See, so here too, there's this, because the problem is ill-defined, there's a risk that the initial information, which is entirely irrelevant for solving the problem, can actually hurt you and lead you down a path that does not result in resolving the problem. Another example of barriers to problem solving is so-called functional fixedness. Now, this is the idea to, or rather the tendency, to perceive an item only in terms of whatever is its most common use. And this is a nice example of how you have to reframe sort of the information that you have in order to solve a problem. And it is based on the idea of fixation, which again is the tendency to focus on some specific characteristic of an item within a problem. Now, one good example of this is the so-called 2-string problem, which you're seeing depicted here. And the problem goes as follows. So there are 2 strings in a room, and you have to hold both, one with one hand and one with the other. The problem is that if you hold on to one string and then try to make your way to the other string, it's too far away for you to reach it. So how can you solve the problem? And typically, people don't have very good rates of solving this problem until they realize that on the table right here, there are some tools. And at first, this might not help you very much. However, after a while, you might think that what you could do is, because you can't, while you're holding one rope, reach the other rope, you might want to turn this rope here into some kind of a pendulum so that you can make it swing by itself. And then when it swings in, you can just grab it and hold on to it. And so what you might do is you might take one of these tools, attach it to the end of the string, swing it, then you grab the other rope, and then you wait for this rope to swing back. And once it swings back enough, you grab it. And see, the point here is that you somehow need to reframe these tools, not just as things that you can use to, hammer a nail or saw something, but you have to reframe this as something that you can use in order to create a pendulum. And this is exactly what Gestalt psychology considers insight and productive thinking, the idea of going beyond what you already knew. In this sense, it really is going beyond the behavioral approach. There we're just reproducing things you already knew. And this is a wonderful example of how, according to the Gestalt school, problem solving is productive, is going beyond what you already know. Another famous example of this, used in quite a number of studies, is that of a haughty Harry. And the idea is that, similar to the two ropes problem, there's a construction crew in this room and they're constructing a structure, but then they go on break and they need to have a rack to put their hat on. And so the question is, can you build a rack to put your hat on? And of course, none of the things that are in here are quite conducive to thinking about a way to hang a hat on something. But of course, if you stop thinking about these as two bits of wood and this clamp as just a clamp, you can imagine that you can use the two bits of wood and the clamp in order to create this kind of hook structure. Again, this is another example of how the Gestalt school would stress the importance of reframing information, and how insight would be what the process